Hello, Warriors. Welcome to Chevrons, a podcast by the Enlisted Force for the Enlisted Force. I'm your host, Mr. Timothy Sandland. Today, we are speaking to 4 recent participants from the technical sergeants involved in mentoring enlisted airmen, or the TIME workshop held at Hanscom Air Force Base. Technical sergeants from several Air National Guard units throughout the Northeast, as well as a handful of members of the Paraguayan Armed Forces participated. Attendees were guided by several Chief Master Sergeants and subject matter experts about how to develop their leadership skills. Discussions were led on topics such as empowerment, total force fitness, generational leadership, emotional intelligence, and innovation. Our episode today is sort of a live trip report of the workshop. What worked, what didn't, what were some of the lessons learned, and why workshops like this are so valuable in the development of airmen and NCOs at all levels. Let's introduce our panel for today's discussion. Tech Sergeant Fallon Lundgren from the 104th Fighter Wing and Tech Sergeant Jonathan Cawley from the 102nd Intelligence Wing were both attendees at the workshop. And we also have Chief Master Sergeant Timothy Muty from the 104th Fighter Wing and Chief Master Sergeant Shane McGuire from the 102nd Intelligence Wing, who were both mentors at the workshop. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for coming in and sharing your experience. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your military story? And what is your current position? Let's start with you, Sergeant Lundgren.
All right, so I'm Sergeant Lundgren. I've been in for about 6 years now, a little longer. I am a paralegal full-time out at the 104th. I joined the Air Guard on a whim, last minute. I was graduating from UMass Amherst, and I was freaking out about what I was going to do with my life. So I contacted a recruiter and thought I might go to law school one day. So I said, paralegal sounds like a good fit for me. And I've been there ever since.
Fantastic. Sergeant Cawley.
Hey, Tech Sergeant Cawley. I've been in for about 14 and a half years now. I spent the first 10 as a traditional guardsman over in CE here at the 102nd. I did a whole bunch of TDYs and 1 deployment overseas. And I just kind of wanted to do something else with the back half of my career. So I was looking around, and full-time opportunities are abundant here at the intel portion of the wing. So I just jumped ship, and never looking back. I love it over here. I love the crew that I work with. The leadership over here is fantastic, and it's like a home away from home for me.
Fantastic. Chief McGuire.
Well, hey, I'm Chief Shane McGuire. I started my journey in 1995, so almost 29 years ago. I started in aircraft maintenance. I think I'm on my 3rd AFSC, so I was a fuel systems mechanic, an engine mechanic, an imagery analyst, and now I'm lucky enough to be the senior enlisted leader for the 102 ISR group. So I joined, like a lot of other people, to pay for college. And it took me a whole lot further than that. So almost 29 years later, here I sit.
And Chief Muty.
Hi, it's Chief Muty. Joined in 1998, 7 of 7 in my family, so going with the Guard is a family business. I've been doing it for 25 years. I have 6 AFSCs, so I've been bouncing around a lot based off of aircraft conversions and stuff like that. And now I'm in the 104th Medical Group as the senior enlisted leader.
Great. So here on Chevrons, we talk about many varied topics having to do with the enlisted development. Presumably, a number of the topics were covered at the TIME workshop, so it seems like a great forum for discussing the workshop. With that, let's focus on a few main points. First of all, what are your general thoughts on the workshop itself?
I think the TIME conference plays a critical role because at the tech sergeant rank, a lot of us are kind of at the cusp of what are we going to do with our career? Are we going to get out? Are we going to stay in? Do we want to commission? Do you want to stay the enlisted route? So I think in many ways, it's a great opportunity to essentially re-blue your tech sergeants, have them reinvest and remind them why they serve, but also all the opportunities and help them learn how they can expand their horizons too, outside of just wearing the rank they wear now.
Yeah, overall, I thought it was a great experience. Definitely the rebluing thing, but it wasn't as much, like drink the Kool-Aid, as they usually say, as I kind of anticipated moving into it. It just kind of it gave me a lot of perspective on where I am in my career, and a lot of perspective from how other people are like dealing with similar problems and struggles, but also like the good things that come out of being a successful leader and what the Air Force does have to offer. And I got to hear a lot of great stories from a lot of different people. But it definitely made me like take a step back and take a look at myself and like, oh, okay, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? So I think that alone was worth it.
Yeah, I think obviously the idea behind the conference is to further give our technical sergeants a chance to further develop where there's not as many opportunities for that as perhaps there used to be. But to implore them, as they're going to be our replacements, to take that leadership role, and we'll get into talking about empowerment, but take that leadership role to the next level as they're moving up the ranks. To Sergeant Lundgren's point, the possibility for them to be at a crossroads is there. So we want to give them that fresh perspective. We want to give them the opportunity to maybe put themselves in positions where they haven't been able to be before. So I think overall, the idea is just a great opportunity to bring a bunch of similar ranked individuals together from disparate career fields and give them the opportunity to shine.
Yeah, to kind of caveat that, Chief McGuire brings up a point. I think one of the takeaways that isn't always seen until after the fact is the peer-to-peer conversations. So having the time conference allows members from, again, different AFSCs, different jobs, different bases, different states, to get together and have that peer-to-peer. I feel that lately, I had a conversation earlier today actually, that with our changing Air Force and with the change of how we do PME and not having as many in-residence courses, that peer-to-peer or that ability to speak with people versus just doing book work is invaluable. And having the ability now to reach out to people that you met at this conference and have that conversation is just that much easier, and then it allows you to grow. That is a huge piece of leadership, is being able to reach out to individuals that are in similar scenarios or even different scenarios and work it through. And that just is, to me, is probably one of the biggest pieces of the time conference that we kind of just let happen organically. And then it's after the fact when people realize that, oh, I can reach out to this person, or I heard this story and this is how they developed. So I think that was a success just with us here, and then even just hearing throughout the conference or the workshop.
Awesome.
I think one of the observations I made towards the beginning of the week, and this is probably true with a lot of situations like this, is you could see those folks who knew each other prior to going to the conference, or maybe met each other at the hotel the night before, were kind of glued together as the conference started. And as the week went on, you could see the seats change a little bit in the auditorium to where people were getting comfortable with one another. And to Chief Muty's point, that networking aspect, I think I challenged everybody midweek to say, if you're not walking out of here with at least 4 or 5 names and numbers in your pocket, you're missing out on a grand opportunity. And I'm hopeful, through feedback, that we'll hear that those networks are being further developed. Folks from different bases in different states can reach out to one another and lean on each other to say, hey, I'm experiencing this. Are you guys going through this? Or do you have a solution for this sort of thing? So I'm hopeful that is something that came out of this. What do you guys think your most positive experience was out of the conference?
I'll go off of your point, Chief, of getting the numbers and talking to different people. I think the capstone we did throughout the week was a great start to that. I talked to people from active duty, from Otis, being a 104th member I've never met before. Also someone who came up to me and asked me, hey, do you know, is your command post here? I've worked with them, but like to put a face to the name. But also people just interacting from, the 109th I don't really know where they are geographically on a map. I had to honestly look it up. But having those conversations and building those pairs, especially coming from a legal background, we're a very small office, we're a very small AFSC. So having the opportunity to talk to someone completely different realm on what they do is something that you can't get on a day-to-day basis.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The capstone was a great way almost to like force you to do that, right? So you were given this group of anywhere from like 6 to 12 people, complete strangers, and I think they did that on purpose where no one from the same base was in the same group, and your mentor definitely wasn't someone that you knew, and it basically forced you to work with a bunch of people and just like the icebreaker, you know what I mean? And so that was really nice to, I still talk to a bunch of them. We all have each other's emails and phone numbers, and we're in a group chat. So that was really great. But the biggest takeaway for me from this is they had us like do an exercise, and they put like a list of like 40 words on the board, and they were like, okay, how would you describe yourself as a leader? And you get to pick like 20 of them. And then the second question was, okay, now using 10 of the 20 that you picked, how do you think your subordinates would describe you as a leader? And realistically, I sat there and I was like, man, I have no idea. Like, I've never taken the time to ask my troops what they think of me. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And get like actual constructive criticism. You know what I mean? I don't want like a yes man who's going to be like, oh yeah, you're doing great. Nothing's wrong. You can't improve anywhere. You're perfect across the board, because we all know that's, a load of crap. So that was really good for me. And then it segued really good into the 360 concept that they're going to be rolling out, where you'll actually get anonymous feedback from your leadership, your peers, and your subordinates. And I mean, I'm really looking forward to that, because it'd be nice to know on the areas that I can improve and like where I'm lacking.
Awesome. Thanks. Chief Muty?
So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I think that one of them was that it is a challenge to put something together like this. And as much as on paper things look great, to actually see it come together is awesome. And to see the engagement and involvement of all the airmen, all the technical sergeants, the staff sergeants, our foreign nationals, foreign partners
Yeah.
that were there, it was great. I also, for me, it's being able to talk to the technical side, talk to our team, explain kind of some of the visions, some of the ideas that we have, what we're trying to work towards, but then getting the feedback from them to say, I think you're on track, or maybe we should look at something different, or maybe we should refocus or recage. And I gain a lot from that, because again, same with the same concept that you brought up, like I don't want to hear like I'm doing a great job. Like, if I'm doing a great job, tell me. But if I'm sideways, I tell that to my group all the time, like, just let me know. And to have the conversations throughout, during the briefs, but really after the briefs, I think is just really important. And it just shows the maturity and the involvement and the growing of the force, that ultimately our job is to train our replacements. We spoke of that, and to see that engagement is just, it's awe-inspiring.
Yeah, I think one of my, I had a lot of really positive experiences during the week. Most of them, to your point, most of them occurred after class, in a social environment where people just felt a little more free to talk. I had conversations with folks from other wings. One was an engine troop from the 109th, so we kind of shared the same background. We bonded. One I spoke with, who was, she had mentioned during some of the sessions that she was kind of struggling through her career and felt as though she was, maybe not seen or not heard, but we had a really solid conversation to the point where, she felt comfortable having that conversation. She felt comfortable, having that outlet, which was just fantastic for me. I think what we're all going to find here is that at the end of the day, most of our positive experiences come out of those conversations and that networking that occurred after the conference.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk through, what do you guys think the benefits of the conference were? Oh, I keep saying conference. I can't say that. What do you think the benefits of the workshop were?
Workshop.
So one benefit, I think, was we had, I believe, Dr. Frost talk to us about generational leadership. And as a millennial, we do take up majority, I think, now in the force. And when he had us stand, and it was majority millennials in that room, but what blew me away was when there was Gen Z standing as tech sergeants. And in my head, I was thinking, well, they're not old enough to be tech sergeants. They're still in high school. What do you mean? And of course, I have brothers who are Gen Z. They're much younger, but they're in college. So of course, they're old enough to be in the military. So understanding that and taking that perspective of the plane, that example he used, right? Like we're not changing who we are. We're just outfitting ourselves to adjust to this newer generation, right? How they speak, what is now the norm that may have not been the norm for millennials or Gen Xers. I think that was really important because now tech sergeants who are millennials, we're dealing with Gen Z. So how do we do that, right? Like one of our gripes when we were coming up was how Gen X handled us as younger enlisted. So now the roles are reversed, and it's a good opportunity to learn how to handle those conversations and those relationships.
I love that point. I love the point where your perspective is now affected in a similar way that it was for the Gen Xers, right? So now you said dealing with working with the Gen Z, and it's a different perspective than maybe you had. So like that's a big thing.
Yeah, Gen X probably, not Gen X, I'm sorry. Gen Z probably views millennials how West millennials viewed Gen X, right? So that shift in where we are now, that's a big eye-opener, and one I didn't expect to have.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It's just funny. Old man in the room. When I joined, I just remember my supervisor telling me, they don't make them like they used to. Like you're what you're doing isn't going to equate to anything. And it is funny. It's the same story.
It's very cyclical. Yeah.
Time and time again. And so understanding that and appreciating that. That is huge, and it's just funny to me because I sit in the room and I joke with my supervisors and stuff all the time. Like we said the same thing about you. And look where you are. So like, just eyes wide open, understand how everything is being taken in and evolve and adjust. It's just funny. I remember that to this day as a airman just carving his way, pretty much figuring out that he's never going to make it anywhere.
And then they do.
Yeah.
That's it. Thanks for bringing that up. That actually does my heart a lot of good. It really does. It does. Sergeant Colley?
Yeah. So, aside from the things we've kind of already touched on, like the networking, giving you a new perspective, a bunch of new tools for your toolbox, I think that the capstone project itself was very beneficial to a lot of people as long as they actually took the problem set seriously. Like we were given a bunch of time to develop solutions for what big Air Force is actually struggling with, right? So retention, recruiting, there was a huge list of projects. And I was very fortunate to have worked with a lot of intelligent tech sergeants. And our project was on multi-capable airmen. And, we all kind of just worked together and found a very viable solution. And Chief Hurl had actually reached out to us, and it seems like they're going to be moving forward with our idea. And it may even get some traction moving upwards. So we were actually given an opportunity to solve one of big Air Force or specifically the Guards problems. And even if it isn't our idea that fixes the problem, we brainstormed and gave them a couple of solutions that might actually work. So I think that was just a great opportunity for a lot of the tech sergeants that went to this conference.
I think circling back to favorite points of the week was being able to be there in person and hear all of the different problem statements. Here's some courses of action. Here's a solution statement. things that are, like you said, are viable and things that we can do. Some things are heavy lift, but some things are fairly easy to implement, and things that people like Chief Moody and I just happen to overlook simply because it's not right in our face, or we don't have the perspective that you guys have. So that was a surefire favorite moment for me during the week.
So I think it was interesting that you said that, you guys came up with a solution, and I think a lot of airmen don't realize that they have the ability to make change. So for you saying that again, it's one of those moments where yes, and I don't think a lot of you understand that you are making change. So it may not be this grand project pushing an aircraft or some huge program like, out of a big hangar and look at all this limelight, but you have the ability, you have the capability, and you have the support to make change. So it's taking that is where you're at now, to actually employ that and actually do that, because you are the ones that are going to make the change for the future of the Air Force. And just because you're on Barnes P Patch, or if you're at Otis, or you're at the 109th in Syracuse, you have that ability to make change, because that is what we're told to do. It's what we're trying to think of the
Charged
word.
with.
It is. It's what we're charged with, yes, to do, and you're being told to do it. So don't sit back, find the problem set, but also find the solution. And that's the key. And I think that's where we're crossing that bridge. It's very easy to find a problem, right? I can walk around and this is this and this and this. But it's taking that next step to say, this is what I found as a problem, but here is a solution or multiple solutions, and then trying to work through that. That is where leaps and bounds. And I think that was really awesome that you brought that up, and I just hope that you continue to grow, and you can continue to talk to that again with your peers and with everyone, because that's how we make what we do better.
I think when we talk through the problem and solutions, like one of the things that we discussed during the week was the 360-degree leadership model. And part of that is the concept of leading up. Essentially, you all as NCOs coming to your supervisors, your leaders, and saying, hey, we're struggling with this. This is a problem, but here's a potential solution. And I think that speaks to what Chief Moody was saying. But the recognition that that's not always an easy thing to do, right? So I guess I would throw that back at you guys when we talk about things like leading up. Where do you see that as a struggle for yourselves? Do you see it as a struggle for your peer group? And how do we get after making sure that you guys have the bandwidth to be able to do that? That wasn't on the script, sorry. I just threw that in there.
Flying off. Well, I mean, you and I had an opportunity to have a few offline conversations afterwards, and one thing that, like you said to me, that really stuck with me was like, man, I love talking to you because you don't pull any punches, right? So I feel like in order to get the change, or when you need to have those hard conversations with your leadership, if you're like dancing around the big topic, they're never gonna fully understand what you're trying to get at, or what you're trying to correct, or what would make certain things better. So, I mean, you can't pull those punches. I mean, it is difficult conversations that sometimes just need to be had. Obviously, respectfully, and we are all in the military, and use your chain of command properly. However, sometimes you just have to call a bush, right?
Good point.
Yeah, I think I don't know how to phrase this, but I think there's a lot of upward mentorship. Well, let me start backing up a little bit. So first you gotta learn as an airman how to be a good follower, and then what is expected of your leaders. I think when you first come into the military, it's all fire hosed at you, right? The whole culture, and you're never really taught what looks like a good leader. But then once you get kind of more senior and more into your groove in your career, you start to notice when leadership isn't going right. And it's having the confidence to respectfully go up to your leader, but also building that relationship beforehand where you trust them and they trust you to have those candid conversations of, hey, X, Y, and Z is not working out. I've noticed, maybe if you approached it this way, the shop as a whole would be more behind you or more eager to do this special project or whatever the scenario may be. So I think it's a two-way kind of conversation, right? Have the confidence, but also make sure your leader is receptive, right? And it just goes to having conversations at the printer, right? Or just how was your day, right? Get to know them as a person, and those upward mentorship conversations can be easier, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I think somebody in the audience, if you guys remember this, somebody in the audience made the point that I thought this is another one of those things that just kind of, flies over our heads. They said, okay, we're spending the week talking about leadership, about leading up, about mentoring up. Who's giving this lesson to the senior NCOs and the CGOs and the FGOs? And that was kind of a, knock me in the head moment. I went, well, crap, we're not, but we're going to. So I think that this, and use the word culture, right? Mm-hmm. This is a bit of a culture shift. There's likely a lot of folks out there that are similar to the four of us in this room here, where they're open and receptive to being mentored or being led by those that are subordinate to them. But there are also a lot of folks out there who are not. And I think that that's something that we need to get after, because circling back around to the beginning of this conversation, you guys are going to be the ones who are in our seats and in fairly short order. It's not all that far away. So I thought that was an interesting point to make, but I think the culture is something we need to get after too.
Yeah, and I think that, we kind of accelerate, change, or lose. General Brown is telling us to push decision-making down to the lowest appropriate level. And from our standpoint, we just have to be engaged in that and realize that has to happen. And the discussions that we've had in the past, with that is, in garrison and with low risk is a great time to start testing that and allowing the lower leadership to run processes and programs and make change and stuff. Because of the low risk, when it does come down to the point where it has to be done, that discomfort is mitigated. It may not be eliminated, but it's mitigated because they've been allowed to make decisions and they've been allowed to make mistakes, which ultimately have come to outcomes and gains. So I think it's a conversation, definitely. It's a shift in, again, how we do business, but it's where we are today, and as we do that, this is generational change, and it's another Good conversation point. That I had that's why, again, having this workshop is so important to have these conversations, because now we're speaking to the technical sergeants, the staff sergeants, and now they're growing with that concept in hand, which then will slowly make it down to the airmen, and that's how we make these changes, and that's how we grow as a force, and it's just how it has to be, and it's exciting to see. It is a little unnerving because it is a little bit different, but I'm excited to be part of it and do it.
Yeah, I think with General Brown's action order eliminating bureaucracy, I think it's important for all leaders, and when I say all leaders writ large across the force, anywhere from a staff sergeant all the way up to the top, we're all leaders in some way, shape, or form, and I think we all need to do our part to get behind eliminating bureaucracy, making processes easier, being smarter about decisions. I don't really know where to go with that.
Well, I mean, leading to efficiency, right? Because if time is finite. Time is finite. We only have so much time to get
Right.
things done. And if we're wasting our time doing things because that's how it used to be done, and we're not doing it because it makes sense, we're just wasting time. And time, as you said, like, the technical sergeant sitting across from us will be in our seat soon, right? That time, it sounds crazy, right? 25 years sounds crazy. 29 years sounds crazy. It happens in a blink of an eye.
It does.
And if we're just not doing it effective and efficiently, we're doing it wrong. And so I guess it's kind of looking at it from that lens of, when we're doing these processes and procedures and when we're doing change and why we're doing change. What is the intent? What is the goal? And by using those lenses, it just aids us in maybe we don't need to be doing it, or maybe we need to change everything that we do on it to do it better. And so that it allows us to do other things as well.
I had a boss who used to say, rarely has the expression, "we've always done it this way," ever been a good idea for continuing to do it that way. So, to your point, that's definitely true. All right, so when we talk through the entirety of the workshop, what do you guys think didn't work? What do you think we need to change next time around?
One thing I would have loved to walk away with was more tools in my pocket and I'm thinking more specifically of having those difficult conversations with your subordinates. Every conversation, every subordinate is going to be completely different, the scenarios surrounding it, but having various ways to practice it would have been great. Or, what resources outside of the traditional supervisor resources can I refer my airman that is having a problem to? So, for example, I'll use fitness, right? I'm a young airman who failed her first PT test out of basic training. I was able to learn from that, right? But what I would have loved was, my supervisor coming to me and being like, what's going on in your life at that time? At the time, I had a lot going on. I was moving in the midst of taking my PT test and a whole other personal issues that it would have been nice to be heard, have those conversations. Also, what resources can I use to get fit, right? Now we have, I believe it's called OTX, right? Or
O2X.
O2X, okay. So how to have those difficult conversations where you're putting the member on notice that maybe they're not meeting standards, but how do you correct that behavior, right? So I would have loved to have more of that put into my toolbox.
Do you think that like a practical application, scenario-based kind of one-on-one, or where you had the opportunity to sit and occupy both of those roles, do you think that would have proved helpful?
Yeah, so when the first shirts did their presentation, they had a little bit of a role-playing scenario. And I think that's kind of what I had envisioned. Maybe we went out into our capstone groups and practiced those difficult conversations, maybe not in front of an auditorium full of people, right? But just using that practice, I had a conversation earlier, and it's ALS is all correspondence now, and that's where most guardsmen would have gotten that practice. So giving it in person as a tech sergeant, I think it's just as valuable as giving it to a senior airman.
So I appreciate that, because I think that's kind of where I think talking through this and everything else is one of the goals of the workshop, or one of the things is bridging that gap, right? Mm-hmm. So Sergeant Lundgren is a unique where she is younger in her career, right? So, but we have staff sergeants, technical sergeants. We used to call it the staff infection, right? Like you're a staff sergeant for many moons, mm-hmm. And there's a large gap in between ALS and NCOA for PME, right? And you're kind of stuck in this quandary. And again, talking earlier in this conversation about that, providing that kind of that period where you're in that, am I staying in, am I getting out? But also that point of like, I haven't really got the PME that I think I need because I've been stuck in this section. I think that to her point of maybe having some of those things that would build those tools that have just kind of been stagnant for a little bit. I think we can do better on that. I think that's a focus that I think we should work on. to make sure that we are hitting some of those points of the leadership and supervisory skills that can help. To her point where she talked about, we can sit down and I'm just going to use the PT example or the fitness example because she brought it up, but we'll sit down and we'll have the conversation with the member, but those conversations are about rehabilitation, right? Sometimes we miss that mark where it's just because I sat down and had the conversation, like, you need to do better, here's the standards, blah, 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 blah. We have a role and responsibility with follow through, right? That isn't the paperwork, or that discussion isn't the end. It's actually the beginning of the rehabilitation. So it's teaching that what is the next step? How do we continue this conversation? How do we get better as a group? How do we get better as an individual? And so we can get through this hurdle that we're running into to better, so that then we can move on and grow. And right, there's a little hurdle, it's a bump. We all got bumps in the roads. Every single one of us here. We didn't do it right all the time. And if anyone says they did it, good on them. But I'm going to tell you right now, we all have stories. And but we've learned from those, right? That's the key thing, because I will say that for the most part, I had really good leadership through my career. And when you hit those bumps in the road, that was the big thing. It was, okay, here we are. We're here again. How did we get here? Okay, how do we get out of it? And then that progression of moving forward. Yeah. And I think that would be a good thing to kind of speak
Absolutely.
to. Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with the lack of skill sets and actual practical application for, it should be at the staff sergeant level, right? So I was fortunate enough to get in residence for ALS, but in the Guard, our base gets 2 seats a year, maybe something like that. It's ridiculous. And I feel like that is part of the problem. Because in the Guard, everyone's guaranteed more or less staff, right? So but who are we promoting? Are these people actually ready to be an NCO and lead and instruct and all that stuff? I know that our base, or our unit specifically, is working to fix that. We're making it a little harder, and you have to take tests and check a little bit more boxes for the leadership skills and abilities in order to even go to a board to be considered for staff, which is great. And that definitely needs to happen. But I think that's a huge problem Guard-wide, right? Is because how much are you actually going to learn by taking an online course where you can just control F everything? And I hate to say that, but it's all open book. How much are you actually learning? And the answer is nothing. You're not ready unless you do go in residence and get that application.
I'll be honest.
Touch on that with
I
you.
did ALS via correspondence, and I couldn't tell you what I learned. Yeah. And I'm about to start NCOA, and it's probably going to be the same thing, right? I'm going to finish that course online, and I'm going to brain dump it all and move on to the next thing.
So I guess, as an aside, I know typically when you get to the end of one of those PME courses, especially correspondence, they'll offer you some sort of critique or feedback mechanism. Mm-hmm. Use it, please. One of the things that has driven me crazy is, and I talk about it all the time, history, heritage. Those are things that in the Air Force, those are things we don't talk about anymore. Mm-hmm. Those are things that are not a part of your PME anymore, and it's mind-blowing to me. So use that feedback and say, here's what I need more of. Here's the stuff that will stick throughout my career, and here's the stuff that's just not. It just doesn't matter. I'll be willing to do that. That's probably an aside to this whole program, but
yeah,
I figured I'd mention it.
I did have something else aside from all of that I would have liked to have seen at this workshop. So it's called a time workshop, right? And as NCOs, as tech sergeants, it's very unlikely that you don't have troops under you. You don't have additional duties, additional responsibilities at this point in your career. You have all of this extra responsibility, piling up and piling up and piling up. But they don't even talk about time management. It's a time conference, but okay, you're giving me all of this extra responsibility and telling me what I should be doing, but how do I do it, right? How do I prioritize and execute? And then at the same time, okay, now that I'm doing all this, do I have to work later? Does that mean that it's going to affect my home life? How do you maintain a healthy work-life balance on top of like, how am I supposed to get through all my day-to-day tasks? And like, you can only delegate so much and you only know so much, but like maybe just a little bit, like a block of time about like, oh, okay, this is how we do it as senior leaders. This is what's worked for us through our careers. Something along those lines, I think would have been super beneficial for all of the tech sergeants in the room.
Make time for time management is what you're saying?
You got it.
Got it.
Make time for time.
I think we can
Yeah.
do that.
I think adding to that too is prioritizing. Like, how do you prioritize? I had a boss once tell me, actually almost every day, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. So what is your wisdom to us to prioritize, right? And if we don't know, encourage us to have those conversations with you so we can figure it out.
All good points.
Yeah, really good stuff.
I think there was one suggestion, and I can't remember, I think it was in an offline conversation, where one of the tech sergeants pulled me aside and said, hey, next year, in keeping with the time idea, give us more time to work on whatever it is that is the desired outcome of the workshop. So if it's a capstone, if it's a whatever it happens to be, give us more time to work on that, where you as mentors, coaches, leaders are not involved. And I thought about that for a little bit, and it made sense to me. I'm curious about your thoughts on that, if you thought that would be helpful, or if you think it's more helpful having the mentor in the room anytime you guys are together as a flight.
I think it's like a 50-50 split, right? Because sometimes people are scared to say things depending on the rank of the individual who's also in the room, right? When a chief walks into a room of tech sergeants and the room goes quiet, right? You know what I mean? So there is a little bit of hesitation depending on what you're talking about.
No idea what you're talking about.
It's literally
I'll
happened
just
at
excuse
lunchtime today.
myself out of here. Yeah. But yeah, so I don't think it necessarily matters too much if the mentor's there or not. But I mean, they did, obviously you have to be flexible, and with everything that happened through the time conference, people were late, things got pushed. They had originally a good amount of time set for us to knock these capstones out of the park, but that was what went first, right? So when other things ran long, that's where we suffered. So I do agree that maybe that time should be a priority, and maybe try and take it from somewhere else. I know it's difficult, and I mean, I don't know how you would balance that, but
It's a
I
great
feel
point.
like that was the first thing to go every day. Like, they were like, oh yeah, you have an hour and a half today. And then it was like half an hour. And then, oh yeah, by the way, we're locking the building, so you have to get out. Like, go do it somewhere else. But I mean, fine for everyone who was staying at the hotel, that's great. But I mean, we had a couple people in our group that were commuters. So now they have to drive to the hotel, hang out there in their uniform, and then commute home. It just seemed not fair to some individuals.
I don't know if it was someone in my group, but someone I had a conversation with while we were at the workshop made a good point when they said Monday was a travel day for us, and then we met up for the meet and greet type event at the in the evening. That would have been a great day if we maybe reported in at 1300, get to know your group, and kind of start working. Even though maybe going in blind before you're starting to get all the information from these seminars to, and then using the information you're getting to beef up what your project's going to be. I just thought that was a really great point they had raised.
Do you think, and I'm kind of spitballing here because ultimately the goal is to make this better next time than it was this time around, and then so on and so forth. So do you think that reaching out to the flights ahead of time, saying, here is your list of subjects, we're 2 or 3 months out from the conference, find a time to meet as a flight, whether it's over virtual means or via telephone, whatever it is, decide what your project is going to be, and that way on day one, here's the outline of the project that you're going to be doing, here's all the stuff that you can choose from, or choose your own adventure, and then on that Monday, here's your agenda, you're going to come in at 1300, there'll be a social time, and then you guys are set off to start working on things on your own. Do you think that would be successful?
From my
helpful?
own experience, I don't think so, because I wasn't originally on a Teams list. I had to reach out to someone and be like, hey, I don't have an assigned flight. So I know there were already like group texts going on that I was left off of because I was, put on the list last minute. So if you can get those lists nailed down ahead of time and give them maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior, I think that would be great, just so those communications can start happening, or even if they're drilling prior to the workshop and they can set a time off where everyone from the 104th or the 102nd gets to the same conference room and they all do a conference call, whatever it may be, as long as that list can be narrowed down and finalized with enough time.
Solid suggestions. You'll notice I'm furiously scribbling notes over here so that
I do think that might be beneficial. However, it seems like it was just kind of left up to the tech sergeants as individuals to try and reach out to these people. And some of us may not have had like contact numbers. Like I spoke to a couple of the groups and they were like, oh yeah, I didn't meet anyone until day one. You know what I mean? And like, I was fortunate enough where someone in my group, had the numbers and created a group chat. And so we were all texting, kind of getting familiar and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, if like the senior enlisted advisor just put together the group or a group email or something like that, hey, these are your members, this is who's in your group, and this is a list of topics I'd like you all to discuss amongst yourself in this platform, doesn't matter what it is, and just at least decide on one topic that you can all agree with and you'll get behind. And that way you hit the ground running. Because again, day one, nothing, right? Social, hangout, very, very mellow. Day two, we spent the whole day just talking about ideas, even into like day 3. So we really only had like a day and a half to grab the concept, talk through it, figure it out, get it into some kind of like either PowerPoint or bullet points or an outline, and then present it. Like I just feel like it could have been so much more if we even just had those extra like 2 hours. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
No, those are all great points, and
Lessons learned.
I can't tell you how encouraged I am to have this conversation with, and that I'm hopeful that feedback. I mean, we're talking with two out of 125 that attended this conference, so I'm hopeful that the feedback is as forthcoming throughout the other 123 as it is with you two. So I appreciate that. So let's we'll kind of bring this up, right? So the proverbial elephant in the room. So there was some, we'll call it raw emotion that was shown towards the tail end of the week, where a couple of attendees, 2 tech sergeants, technically 3, I think there were 3 that actually got up to kind of speak their mind. Seemed a bit of a tipping point for them personally in their careers and what they had been dealing with. I just kind of wanted to talk through that, have a conversation about where you guys were at with that, what you thought of it, and whether or not you thought it was helpful. I'm open to any.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's important that we understand and we realize that we might feel that we have things going in the right direction and we're doing the right things, but we still have members of our team that are struggling, having difficulties up and down the chain, right? So it's just, this is a forum, but it was based off of their scenarios and their events. And I think that it's important that we listen to that and we understand that that's still there. And it's encouraging. It's encouraging that the members have the ability to speak to it, but it's also allows me, just in my organization and with my team, that I need to continue to have these conversations. I'm not getting it right all the time, and we're not getting it right. And I kind of joke. I joke with my team all the time, and I say, if I get it 60% of the right, most of the time, then I'm actually doing a really good job, because I'm really trying hard. But I'm also very aware that I'm going to make mistakes, and so instead of just not talking about it and brushing it under the carpet, per se, I think it's important that we address it, we understand that that's there, and then we try to work towards a better work environment we work towards trying to take care of each other better, and be there to listen. Sometimes that's the most important part. The most important part is actually, and there's a difference between hearing, I hear you, and listening. Listening is that active piece of actually, letting that person, speak to you and tell you what's going on and what struggles they're having, and then try to work towards a solution, and I think that even though it might have been a little bit like, wow, what's going on, I think for the room as a whole, again, probably 135 people based off of presenters and everything else, I think it's a little bit like, okay, we still have some work to do.
Bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah, and that's good though. That's good because
I agree.
That then allows us to understand that we need to focus some attention and we need to get better because we need the team, right? We need everybody involved. Everybody it has the most important job. That was the conversation that one of the talking points that I had is who has the most important job? Everybody has the most important job because we have to do it as a team. And I think that was it was good, tumbling, but in the same, I think that it gives us something to strive to do better, and that's also what this is about, right? It's not just about teaching and training and cultivating technical sergeants. It's also about having us open our eyes and understand that we need to do better. That's okay, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I mean, I had a list of things, and I figured we were going to touch on this at some point, and as Chief McGuire had come in, he was like, okay, so, I mean, we can all, sit here and talk about all the negative things associated with it, right? But what kind of positive thing can you pull out? And I was like looking at my list, and I was like, oh man, maybe I'm thinking about and looking at this the wrong way. But it was one of the positive things is be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? We talk about that a lot.
Good point.
And I, as a leader, I am not prepared, and I don't think anyone sitting in that audience was prepared and had the tool sets to handle it. So it was incredibly interesting to see a whole board of chiefs up there and just kind of watch them and see exactly what they were doing, how they were responding, and how they would handle that situation. And it just goes to show you what kind of leadership skills you all have that we don't yet. And, that's something that I look forward to learning too, because if I was up there in that situation, I would not have been prepared. I would not have had the tool sets to handle that situation as calmly and as well as you did and as uncomfortable. You could see it in the 125 or 123 people that were sitting down at that time. Everyone started to get a little squirmish and squiggly and slouching down in their chairs. And it was definitely an eye-opening moment, like you said. And it was one positive thing, I guess, that I got out of it is just watching how a bunch of chiefs handled a situation like that. It was very impressive.
So I appreciate that. Leading people is the hardest job.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Lindgren brought it up earlier. Everyone is unique and different, and everyone's situation is different, and so it's just but it's try our best, and again, I'm not going to get it right all the time, but it's not going to stop me from trying to get to yes and get to the right answer. So.
I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said watching and being able to observe the chiefs and how they handled it. But I also think one of the main focus, I think it was Chief Jeffers from the 104th that kept saying, this is a time for real talk. And seeing that the time workshop was able to get to the point where these individuals felt comfortable enough to express what they were going through and use it as an opportunity for discussion, I think speaks volumes. It could have been very easy for them to just sit back and not say anything and be very dismissive of what was being talked about or what they were learning, being, they really don't care, it's what they're saying isn't true, and then just brew with it, right? But they felt comfortable enough to say something, and I think that speaks volumes to the environment that the cadre and those who put on the workshop did, right? Like you met your goal there, being able to have real talk.
So for context, for folks that are listening, the situation was such that 2 airmen decided to get up and present their personal situations that they had dealt with over, I'd say, an abundance of time. And it became a boiling point for them where they felt comfortable, thankfully, bringing their stories to us. It culminated with one of them looking at the group of chiefs and saying, "You failed us as leaders." Now, so that's the elephant in the room, right? That's what we're here to talk about. So, as I was sitting through that, initially, my mind instantly went to being defensive. How have I failed you? How did I wrong you? But then having some time to sort through it as we were listening and hearing their stories, I thought to myself, well, she's not talking about us. They're not talking about us. They're talking about leaders. They're talking about leaders at every level. So at the end of it, it was easy to say to them, yeah, we failed you. Because at some point during whatever window of time your experience lasted for, there is not one there's not one chance that there weren't a multitude of people that walked by these situations and just decided, nope, I'm not going to say anything, it's not my place. Or that said, I'll let somebody else handle it. So in the grand scheme of things, yeah, we did. Ultimately, I think that each of those tech sergeants had a good outcome to the week. They both participated in their capstones. I think they both got some good out of it. There were a lot of conversations afterwards. But ultimately, I hope that was more of a learning experience for the overall audience, where they could say, hey, you know what, sometimes it is okay to say what's on your mind. Sometimes it is okay to get things off of your chest. Sometimes it is okay to have a boiling point. Granted, we're in the military, there's a chain of command, right? There's a right way to do things. Those are the rules. Sometimes there's exceptions to the rules. And I think that to me, that was one of those exceptions. No, I appreciate you guys being willing to talk through that, because that was a unexpected part to the week, but I think ultimately it was a really good learning lesson towards the end of that week. And if anything, we talk about leading up. That was an interesting way to do it, but that was exactly what that was. That was exactly what that moment was. Any other thoughts on that situation?
No.
That
pretty much sums it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So running around, closing thoughts. What are your closing thoughts on the time conference, on the events that we had, the speakers we had, the presentations that were there? What are your overall thoughts?
Are we gonna?
Did you get to touch on the empowerment portion?
Yeah.
Oh no, we haven't
theme.
yet. Oh, do you want to go back to what didn't work?
No, just the theme. Like, what
Yeah.
did you think of the theme?
Okay, yeah. So everybody kind of talk through what you thought of the theme for the time conference this year was empowered airmen. And before we started recording this podcast, Chief Muty shared with me that he wasn't super enthused about that. So talk me through that.
Yeah, so, I believe at this level, so I believe when we're working through the NCO tiers and then into the senior NCO tiers, my personal belief is that we're moving through empowered and we're going more towards obligated. I feel empowered allows me to make a decision, make a choice. So I'm empowered to do something. So that means that either I can or I can't. And I feel that when we start moving through the ranks E6, E7, E8, and up, we become more obligated to do things. I'm obligated to take care of my airmen. I'm obligated to make sure that they're trained and equipped. I'm obligated to make sure that I'm doing right for the organization, right for the Air Force, and beyond. And I just look at it from that standpoint because I feel like I kind of lose that ability to choose, because I'm put in positions where now that I have to make the choice, right? And again, I may not get it right, but there's times and places where we have to make those difficult decisions. And when we're talking about empowered, I just feel like it just still allows me a little bit of flexibility, and we're trying to train through that point where now it's your ball, it's your court. You need to start making the decisions. And so I believe that, yes, I think as an airman, going through basic training, I talked about it to the team, that, besides coming from sister services, we all started from the same place. All of us started as airmen. We all started in Lackland Air Force Base, the gateway of the Air Force. And we have grown through this. So at that point, yeah, you have to embrace the culture. You have to be almost indocked in how the military works. I mean, we even talked about that, drinking from a fire hose. But as we start making our way through these promotions and through the ranks and through these leadership roles, we kind of have to flip the script a little bit and understand that the decisions have to be made. And so by empowering, yes, I understand the concept, but I feel that we need to kind of change our thought process a little bit and understand that we have to do that. And when you look at it from being obligated, then you kind of say, like, that's me. I joked about it when I took over the position as the senior enlisted leader at Med Group. There was one day I had a revelation, and I said to myself, wait a second, they're waiting for me. Like, they're waiting for me to make the decision. And there was a game changer, first off, because I was like, whoa, man, wait a second. But second, it clicked with me to understand that, like, I have to lead. I have to make the decisions. I have to make choices that are difficult and push through. And I think that when we're coming through that crossroad, right, we talked about that crossroad, that point of the technical sergeant, and then pursuing forward, we need to understand that, like, where we fit in the mix and what our role is, and then how we employ that. Again, going back to that concept, and by having that conversation of, like, now you are obligated to lead your people. You're obligated to take care of your airmen. You're obligated to do right. You're obligated to make sure that they do have the equipment and the training and the ability, and then you're providing them the resources and providing them to make those decisions at the lower level. Then the entire team, the entire organization will excel. And if we're still looking at it from this point of, like, I have a choice to do something, I just feel like we're still just kind of, we're bobbling with our hand. What do I do with my hands? And so I use an example when I talk about it to a lot of different people, is that we can stand and watch someone fight something. Let's say move a piece of age equipment on the flight line. It's not my job. Right? My job is not to move that piece of age equipment. Or I can go out and assist and know that, hey, I'm here to help my fellow airmen and make that job a little bit easier, and then go about my day. And now, instead of that person struggling for hours trying to do that, it's minutes, and then we press on. So I think it's just looking at it a little bit differently. It's still the same topic, but words matter. Using a little bit different words and saying that, now it's your point. It's your ability. You have to go and make the changes. You have to go and make the decisions. You have to go and lead your people. And by saying that, I think that is that turning point. That's the point where you're stepping off into the next level from the NCO into the senior NCO. And I think that that's where I think that, yes, you're empowered, but you're obligated. This is your game, and you are going to push us into the future.
So I'm curious of our two technical sergeants, their thoughts on that.
So when I think of empowerment, I think I take more of an approach with Chief Muty. I think, how do we as tech sergeants empower our airmen, our staff sergeants that are under us, right? How do we let go of the reins and let them make those critical decisions while still making sure their training is getting done and, they're meeting standards? What does that look like? How do we effectively empower them while still making sure that critical training is still getting done, right? Because I feel like a lot of tech sergeants or anyone in that training role is afraid to stray from the MTP or the military training plan just a little bit, because these tasks need to get signed. I need to get them to their 5 level, their 7 level. But also, this airman has experience from their civilian job or their civilian education that has nothing to do with their military job. So they may be looking at something completely different than I am, because I do it every day, right? So how do I empower them to feel comfortable enough to raise their hand and say, hey, actually, Sergeant, I think taking this approach is going to be much better, right? And how do we accept that as their leaders?
Yep, that was really good. No,
She's got
she nailed it. Yeah. So empowering, I guess, to me means like making sure your airmen are properly equipped to succeed in whatever capacity that is, whatever your job it is. Especially with like my team here at the Intel Wing. There's no one road from A to B, right? We can't just there's so many different ways to get to the same end goal. And I give them the tools and the knowledge, but the biggest part that I found that helps them succeed is the why, right? So why do we do this whole thing, right? What is the whole purpose of exactly what you're doing here, and what is the end result? So I'm going to give you these tools, and now I need you to build your own roadmap. And then let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you decided to go from A to B, and which tools did you utilize, and how did you get there? And then one analyst did it this way, another analyst did it this way, another analyst did it this way. And then we're going to all come together and talk about it. All right? And which one was the most successful? Which one was the easiest? And like reinvent the wheel, I guess, is what you would say. It doesn't have to be, well, this is because we've always done it this way. This is how we used to do it. Like empowering your airmen means giving them the tools to succeed and then letting them figure it out. Sure, like sometimes you have to put the bumpers up, right? Like start coloring outside the lines a little too far, like, oh, no, come back, But just letting them figure it out for themselves, I think, is what empowerment is all about.
So I guess I'll add to that, right? And I think you made some really good points. Giving the tools and allowing you to go off and succeed. I think a part of it is allowing someone to go off and fail too, right? Failure's an excellent teacher. I think we talked about that last week a little bit. But no, I think you both have awesome points. One of the things that I wanted to, we're talking about empowered airmen, right? I want to focus on specifically the airman piece for a second, because I believe this was the topic of conversation last week. So somebody asked me, and this is one of those networking conversations that happened after hours. Somebody said, hey, what do you call, an E5 in the Marines? And I said, Sergeant? And he said, no, you call him a Marine. What do you call somebody that's in the Army? You call him a soldier. And when you ask somebody in the Air Force what they do, what do?
AFSC.
They tell you you're AFSC, right? I'm an intel person. I'm a jet mechanic. I'm a paralegal. But none of us say I'm an airman, big A airman, right? We don't. So I think when we start talking about the why, when we start talking about the overall culture, we have to get back to, and we talked about this a lot at the workshop, is that we have to be airmen first, and we are AFSC second. So to Chief Muty's point, you see somebody pushing a piece of age equipment out on the flight line, you could very easily say, yeah, that's not my job. Or you could easily say, hey, you know what, that's a fellow airman, I'm going to go help out. I think that's an important part of not necessarily the empowerment part, maybe self-empowerment, but that's an important part of the big A airman thing that we're missing, and a change in the culture that we need to have. So just wanted to make that point anyways.
Yeah, no, and I think, that was a discussion that we had, that we're airmen, that, we're war fighters, it's in the Airman's Creed, that also do an AFSC. So as to your point, we need to continue to focus on who we are and what we are. And then also, when we make decisions, we need to continue, maybe even start, depending on who you are, making decisions, but using the lens of how this affects the organization, the unit, the wing, so on and so forth, and less of how this affects me. Because when we, again, those are those flips. Those are those situations in your career when you can tell yourself, wow, yep, I'm getting it. And personally, that's where I'm progressing, is when I'm making decisions, and the first thing I think of is, okay, how does this affect the organization? Like, how does us doing this affect the organization? And when we start doing that, you really start understanding the bigger picture. And you really start understanding how because all the decisions you make actually do affect the organization, right? But you don't always look at it that way. And when you start doing that, it's when you really are starting to grasp onto that big picture and really starting to grasp onto that, like, what I do matters and what I do makes change, and all those conversations. And I think that's also a part of that, is that when we start, that's the evolution, that's the growth, that's some of the stuff that we talked about over the course of the week, right? You talked about how chiefs handled the situation. Those are those evolutions and those growths when you start looking at and saying to yourself, wow, I'm maturing, I'm growing, I'm developing. And these are all those little skill sets that, again, maybe stuff that we should talk about more, that just all of a sudden you start seeing it, feeling it, understanding it. Someone says to you, like, hey, I noticed you did this and this, and then those are the developments. And I think that's really important, and having those side conversations and stuff, and it was eye-opening. It was in a good way, because that's what people were talking to, but without being kind of like hand carried to that conversation. So
that's great conversations. All right, so as we wrap things up on this podcast, final thoughts, Sergeant Lundgren?
I think, going into time conference, I'll speak for me personally. I was excited because it was a break from my day-to-day, right? I was getting a chance to walk away from my desk and my computer and kind of recage my brain, right? Given that opportunity to stop thinking about my to-do list that is ever-growing, but an opportunity to grow as a leader and network. And I think that time is invaluable, and thankful for the opportunity on that.
Awesome. Sergeant Colley.
Yeah, overall it was a great experience, but again, like everything, it is what you make of it, right? So you could go there and take open-eyed naps for 5 days, just not be at your desk, you know what I mean? And what did you take away from it? Probably nothing. So, I mean, a slew of great speakers, a lot of chiefs, officer panel, first sergeants, everyone. Like, there was no shortage of knowledge in that room. And yeah, overall it was great. Dr. Frost knocked it out of the park. I mean, you cuss too much. If you are listening, Dr. Frost, tone it back a little bit. Chief Barbie, put into perspective the CIBs that we got. It just all around. It was a very well-rounded workshop. And I mean, I would love to go back. I don't know if that's like an option for returning tech sergeants or anything like that, or maybe you guys can put in hey, this is some of our previous people and this is where they are now, or something like that. I'm not sure, but I just thought it was a good experience overall.
Awesome. Chief Beauty?
I think it's a great experience, just to, again, talk with the team, meet new people. It's always great to meet new people. And I think it's kind of a little bit humbling and rewarding to hear that with the inabilities to get to formal trainings, PMEs and stuff, that this did at least provide some of the benefits of those, of going to formal PMEs, with the networking and the talking and the discussion and building those teams and fostering those relationships. So it's nice to hear that, because I know that from our standpoint, putting this together and working through it is, again, that really is one of the key takeaways from the time conference is to build that networking, build those bonds, because again, that is one of my concerns of that gap in PME and stuff is kind of losing that. So I appreciate hearing that, and I think that was just it's so rewarding to be able to step away, take a moment for yourself, take a moment for your professional development, and to then grow and build upon that.
Yeah, I think my overall takeaway is that I appreciated developing, furthering relationships with both people that I knew before and people that I'd never met before. I can tell you that Chief Mutiny and I had only sat in a room together on one other occasion before getting to the time conference, and he's a lifelong friend at this point. I think besides developing relationships, like having the opportunity to have the Adjutant General Keefe, come and talk to us and say, here's where the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is going. Having Brigadier General Gaglio come as the Air Boss and saying, here's where the Air National Guard is going in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I think those were fantastic opportunities in and of themselves. And then, Sergeant Colley, like Sergeant Colley said, Dr. Frost, for listeners out there, go to YouTube, look up Dr. Mike Frost. He is a longtime law enforcement professional. He's ridiculous educational background, but man, can he capture an audience. He really grabs your attention. Just the ability to kind of come together and have real talk, right? Like that was, I think for me, that was probably the best part, where we can all sit down and just have a real conversation with one another. And then hopefully, I think, to your point, Sergeant Colley, I would personally like to see this happen more often. I think right now the periodicity is every 2 years. I think we at least make that an annual thing. If not, the Chief Jeffers and Chief Hurl are going to be mad for saying this, but maybe we try and do this twice a year as something for everyone involved. So, this was an awesome conversation.
So, a great conversation, everyone. I really appreciate you all coming out, especially our friends from the 104th. That was quite a drive you had to endure, and you got it's only half done, so you got to go back. But thanks very much for coming out, and a lot of information was shared here, and it really hit the mark. And hopefully we've got plenty of people listening that can take advantage of this information and this discussion. So thanks again, and that'll be it. Chevrons is out.